ॐ नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय। ॐ नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय। नारायणं नमस्कृत्य नरं चैव नरोत्तमं देवीं सरस्वतीं व्यासं ततो जायमुदीरये। नष्टप्रायेषु अभद्रेषु नित्यं भागवत सेवया भगवतीरुत्तमश्लोके भक्तिर्भवति नैष्ठिकी। ॐ अज्ञानतिमिरन्धस्य ज्ञानाञ्जनशलाकया चक्षुरुन्मिलितं येन तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः। श्रीचैतन्यमनोभीष्टं स्थापितं येन भूतले स्वयं रूपकदा मह्यं ददाति स्वपदान्तिकम्। नमो विष्णुपादाय कृष्णपृष्ठाय भूतले श्रीमते भक्तिवेदान्त स्वामी इति नामिने। नमस्ते सरस्वते देवे गौरवाणी प्रचारिणे निर्विशेष शून्यवादी पाश्चात्य देशतारिणे। जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभो नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासादि गौर भक्त वृंद। हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे। हरे कृष्णा। रीडिंग फ्रॉम श्रीमद् भागवत। By His divine grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada ki jai. We are reading from Canto.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji, we are not able to hear you.
You are not audible. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Yes, Prabhuji is joining from another.
Yeah,
Okay.
so we are reading from Canto-3, chapter 27, Understanding Material Nature. So we are in the section where we are discussing soul without material coverings. Text, this is between 14 to 16. Text 15 now. Manyamanas anashto nashtavan vrisha nashte ahankare ahankarane drishtva nashtavitta ivaturaha.
The living entity can vividly feel his existence as the seer, but because of the disappearance of the ego during the state of deep sleep, he falsely takes himself to be lost, like a man who has lost his fortune and feels distress thinking himself to be lost. Purport. Only in ignorance does a living entity think that he is lost. If by attainment of knowledge he comes to the real position of his eternal existence, he knows that he is not lost. An appropriate example is mentioned herein. Nashtavitta ivaturaha. A person who has lost a great sum of money may think that he is lost, but actually he is not lost, only his money is lost. But due to his absorption in the money or identification with the money, he thinks that he is lost. Similarly, when we falsely identify with matter as our field of activities, we think that we are lost, although actually we are not. As soon as a person is awakened to the pure knowledge of understanding that he is an eternal servitor of the Lord, his own real position is revived. A living entity can never be lost. When one forgets his identity in deep sleep, he becomes absorbed in dreams, and he may think himself a different person or may think himself lost, but actually his identity is intact. This concept of being lost is due to false ego, and it continues as long as one is not awakened to the sense of his existence as an eternal servitor of the Lord. The Mayavadi philosopher's concept of becoming one with the Supreme Lord is another symptom of being lost in false ego. One may falsely claim that he is the Supreme Lord, but actually he is not. This is the last snare of Maya's influence upon the living entity. To think oneself equal with the Supreme Lord or to think oneself to be the Supreme Lord himself is also due to false ego. Hare Krishna.
Next is Kapila Muni explains the living entity can vividly feel his existence as seer, is conscious, a seer. But during the deep sleep, during the Sushupti, or even a regular sleep, what happens is the disappearance of the ego during the state of the deep sleep, he falsely takes on himself to be lost. Just as, and what a beautiful example Bhagavatam gives, Nashtavitta ivaturaha. Just as a man who has lost his fortune thinks himself to be completely lost. In the purport, Srila Prabhupada explains, only in the ignorance the living entity feels that he is lost. And, as the Kali Yuga will progress, there will be unlimited reasons to feel oneself to be lost. I mean, sometimes this is typically feeling lost is typically called as a midlife crisis, right? So what is this midlife crisis is suddenly, in your 40s, between 35 to 50 generally. Person, everything is going well, but still person will think that even if everything is going well, he will think that I am completely lost, what I have achieved in my life. And, one will simply start comparing and, find a reason to be morose or to be dissatisfied. Here in this case, Prabhupada says that it is only in the ignorance the living entity thinks he is lost. Actually, he is not lost. Just like, there is somebody who has lost great sum of money, something like riches to rags stories. And as soon as money is lost, what happens is that, that all the symptoms which come along with money, your big car or somebody's big house or, the big bank balance, the pomp, the relatives, and, the friends flocking around you simply by the virtue of having money. all that also will be lost in the due course of time, and person will himself to be completely lost. But actually he's not lost. He's there. He's there as he is. Only some of the possessions are lost. But because the person is very deeply identifying himself with the money, and therefore he will think himself to be completely lost. Another example is somebody buying a new car. And as soon as new first car, especially when you are your first car in your life, and just imagine a scratch, the first scratch on the first car in your life, it will feel as if somebody has scratched your heart, right? Why? Because there is a very deep identification with matter. Oh, that doesn't mean we should not be taking care of our possessions. The point is not that. But there is a very deep identification. And because the soul is very deeply identifying with the matter, any loss is considered as the personal loss. And Srila Prabhupada writing this purport, right? Srila Prabhupada had a loss of 5 lakh rupees, right, in 1940s. That is, today's value terms, it must be more than 1,000 crore, right? So, and what was Prabhupada's reaction? Prabhupada's reaction was, very, very spiritual. And, that is the reaction of a founder Acharya of a worldwide mission. Prabhupada said, that Harishe Yasyaham Anugrannami Harishe Tadhanam Shanai. And Prabhupada did not lose his purpose. Prabhupada did not lose his motivation, enthusiasm. Prabhupada said, this is Lord's indication that I should be doing something on the spiritual platform and not simply increasing my riches. And then he went on to took on sannyas, and then the history happened. But as soon as the person here, coming back to purport, is awakened to the pure knowledge, what is that pure knowledge? That he is eternal servitor of the Supreme Lord, then he is never lost. Actually, a living entity is never lost. But he thinks himself to be lost. That is the problem. And somebody will say, any practical example? Yes, sir, there is practical example, daily example. What is that daily example? Daily example is when one goes to deep sleep, one will be absorbed in dream. So when we are absorbed in dream, what happens is we are giving up one set of false ego. False ego means the material identification, and we are taking on the another set of false ego, which the dream is dictating. Like sometimes, somebody may become sometimes somebody may become something in the dream. So he has taken on some different set of false ego now, right? And then he thinks that he is lost, but actually he's not lost. He is intact, but he has just taken a different set of identity. Prabhupada says the ultimate trap of this taking wrong identity is Mayavadi philosophers, who will be so much lost in their pursuit of becoming one with the Supreme. At times they themselves will claim, I am the Supreme Lord. And Prabhupada says this is also due to the false ego of Mayavadi. Text 16. Evam pratyavrishatmanam avatmanam pratipadyate sahankarasya dravyasya yovasthanam anugraha. Translation.
Translation: when by mature understanding one can realize his individuality, then the situation he accepts under false ego becomes manifest to him. Purport: the Mayavadi philosopher's position is that at the ultimate issue, the individual is lost, everything becomes one, and there is no distinction between the knower, the knowledgeable, and knowledge. But by minute analysis, we can see that this is not correct. Individuality is never lost, even when one thinks that the three different principles, namely the knower, the knowable, and knowledge, are amalgamated or merged into one. The very concept that the three merge into one is another form of knowledge, and since the perceiver of the knowledge still exists, how can one say that the knower, knowledge, and knowable have become one? The individual soul who is perceiving this knowledge still remains an individual. Both in material existence and in spiritual existence, the individuality continues. The only difference is in the quality of the identity. In the material identity, the false ego acts, and because of false identification, one takes things to be different from what they actually are. That is the basic principle of conditional life. Similarly, when the false ego is purified, one takes everything in the right perspective. That is the state of liberation. It is stated in the Isopanishad that everything belongs to the Lord. Ishavasyam idam sarvam. Everything exists on the energy of the Supreme Lord. This is also confirmed in Bhagavad Gita. Because everything is produced of his energy and exists on his energy, the energy is not different from him. But still, the Lord declares, I am not there. When one clearly understands one's constitutional position, everything becomes manifest. False egoistic acceptance of things conditions one, whereas acceptance of things as they are makes one liberated. The example given in the previous verse is applicable here due to absorption of one's identity in his money. When the money is lost, he thinks that he is also lost. But actually, he is not identical with the money, nor does the money belong to him. When the actual situation is revealed, we understand that the money does not belong to any individual person or living entity, nor is it produced by man. Ultimately, the money is the property of the Supreme Lord, and there is no question of its being lost. But as long as one falsely thinks, I am the enjoyer or I am the Lord, this concept of life continues and one remains conditioned. As soon as this false ego is eliminated, one is liberated. As confirmed in the Bhagavatam, situation in one's real constitutional position is called mukti or liberation. Hare Krishna.
Yeah. Now, further, Kapila Muni explains that when by mature understanding, evam pratyamavasprishya asau atmanam pratipadyate. By one's mature understanding, one can realize his individuality. Then the situation he accepts under the false ego becomes manifest to him. Right. So, in the purport, Srila Prabhupada explains that the Mayavadi philosophers are always concerned about losing their existence in Brahman. And they say that, we just want to get lost in the Brahman or merge in the Brahman, Brahmalina. But Prabhupada says, actually, neither materially nor spiritually you will ever become one with the Supreme. Why? Because this is that, the paradox. When you think that you are one with the Supreme, the knowledge that I am one with the Supreme is second, right? So the Prabhupada says here, the moment there is a knower, knowledge, and knowable, they are existing, there is no perfect amalgamation, right? So I am thinking, I am one with the Supreme. That means that process of thinking is different. It is just like somebody saying, somebody came to Prabhupada and he said that, Swamiji, I just want to become desireless. And Prabhupada says, how can you become desireless? Because I want to become desireless is also your desire, right? So you cannot become desireless. When you desire to become desireless, that itself is your desire, and then that is technically simply not possible. So similarly with the Mayavadi philosophers. And therefore Prabhupada says, both in the material existence and in the spiritual existence, individuality will always remain. This is confirmed in Bhagavad Gita very, very well. That, where the Lord says, Sarve bhavishyami, sarve vayamatah param. That, my dear Arjuna, all these kings existed in the past, existing now, and they will continue to exist in the future in their spiritual forms. Because previous to this verse, the Lord has already, described that you are not the body or the spirit soul. So he's talking on the platform of the soul. Further, Srila Prabhupada says, when one understands the Ishavasya principle of Ishopanishad, what is the Ishavasya principle? That everything is produced by the energy of the Lord and exists on the energy of the Lord. And when one understands this, then we'll understand that even all my possessions and all my energy is also part and parcel of the Supreme Lord. And therefore, the person will not be lost. In that case, Prabhupada gives the previous verse example of somebody is losing money. And Prabhupada, again, one has to be, it is not to encourage any loss of money as, a non-event. That is not the point here. The point here is that one has to take very good care of one's possessions because they are Krishna's blessings or Krishna's arrangements in our life. But in spite of taking very good care of our possessions, if something is lost, one can do some prayaschit or whatever it is, but one should not come to the feeling of that complete life is my life is lost. right? Because at the end of the day, end of the life, we are going to lose everything. Like recently, some time back, there is this assistant to the right hand of Mukesh Ambani, and he was like salary of some 75 crores per annum or kind of thing, and he took the sannyas diksha, typically coming from a community where they and just so the point is that time Mukesh Ambani was saying that eventually one day even I have to do the same thing. I have come without anything in this world, and I have to go without any. So a point is going to come in everybody's life when everything will be lost, and at that point of time or times before, one should not feel this complete hopelessness that everything is lost. No, even if everything is lost materially, the spiritual personality remains, the spiritual identity remains, the devotional service remains, and that beautiful relation of every living entity to the Supreme Lord remains, and that Bhagavatam calls as clear liberation. So Prabhupada concludes this. As confirmed in Bhagavatam, situation in one's situating oneself in the real constitutional position, and that is never going to be lost, right? Muktir hitvanyatha rupam swarupena vyavasthiti. That one's swarupa is never lost to the living entity. Text 17. Devahūti ruvacha purusham prakritis brahman na vimunchati karhichit anunya apashrayatvat trayatvacha nityatvat anayo prabho. Translation.
Sri Devahūti inquired, "My dear Brahman, does material nature ever gives release to the spirit soul? Since one is attracted to the other eternally, how is there separation possible?" Purport. Devahūti, the mother of Kapiladeva, here makes her first inquiry. Although one may understand the spirit soul and the matter are different, their actual separation is not possible, either by philosophical speculation or by proper understanding. The spirit soul is a marginal potency of the Supreme Lord, and matter is eternal potency of the Lord. The two eternal potencies have somehow or other been combined, and since it is so difficult to separate one from the other, how is it possible for the individual soul to become liberated? By practical experience, one can see that when the soul is separated from the body has no real existence. And when the body is separated from the soul, one cannot perceive the existence of the soul. As long as the soul and the body are combined, we can understand that there is life. But when they are separated, there is no manifested existence of the body or the soul. This question asked by Devahūti of Kapiladeva is more or less impelled by the philosophy of voidism. The voidists say that consciousness is the product of a combination of matter, and that as soon as the consciousness is gone, the material combination dissolves, and therefore there is ultimately nothing but voidness. The absence of consciousness is called nirvana in Mayavada philosophy.
Devahūti ruvacha. Devahūti inquired. Purusham prakritir Brahman. So she is calling, oh Brahmana. No, this Brahmana is her own dear child, Kapila Muni. So Devahūti said, my dear Brahmana, does material nature ever give release to the spirit soul? What a beautiful question this is. That ever material nature is so tightly catching the living entity. Nikatastha maya tara, jhapati adhare. Jhapati adhare means the living entity is haunted by matter, right? That jhapatiya is a very strong word. That living entity is haunted by matter. So she's asking, does material nature ever give release to the spirit soul? Since one is attracted to the other eternally means from time immemorial, the attraction is going very deep absorption in matter. How is their separation possible? So this is question of Devahūti. Now Srila Prabhupada very beautifully elaborates the question. What is the purport? So Prabhupada says Devahūti makes her first inquiry, and very deeply Prabhupada is writing this question about. that although one may understand that spirit, soul, and matter are different, now we also understand that we are not the body, we are the spirit, soul, right? And in fact, a new devotee, I remember when I became a devotee and when went home first time, my father asked me after 8 days when I was in the home after becoming devotee. They asked him that, have they taught you anything other than matter, spirit, matter, or you know something more also or different also? So no, this is material, this is spiritual, this is material, this is spiritual. So although we may technically know something is matter and something is spirit, but the actual separation, I mean, when it will be like 10, 12, 1 o'clock, we will feel extremely hungry. And simply being on the platform of thinking, Aham Brahmasmi, is not going to go that hunger away. And similarly, all other functions of the body, all other functions of everything in the matter, right? And therefore, this is how the living entity, avashopiya, very rigidly controlled by Maya. Daivi hesha gunamai, mama Maya duratyaya, very difficult to cross over Maya. And therefore, she's asking that, so, this separation, ever it is possible, then a release from the matter. And then Kapila Muni is going to give very beautiful answers later. That how this separation is possible and how it is easily possible by the performance of devotional service. Correct. Srila Prabhupada further explains here that the matter and spirit, they are the two eternal potencies. And being the potency of the Lord, Maya is no less strong. Right? Prabhupada, in fact, in one of the purport, Prabhupada writes, Maya is as strong as the Supreme Lord. And the living entity is pulled by Maya on one side, pulled by Krishna on another side, and by the mercy of Krishna, Maya is equally strong, giving the equal pull to the living entity. And it is the weight of the living entity on whose side the living entity goes, that side the living entity will progress. Right? So these two eternal potencies, but they are somehow being combined. Achintya. How they are combined? Very difficult to understand. Ichha dvesha samuttayana. Very difficult that pure Satchidananda living entity is combined with Asat Achit Nirananda matter and thinking himself to be itself to be matter and acting on the material platform. And thus it is very difficult to separate one from another. And therefore she is asking how one can be separated. Prabhupada said by practical experience also, one can see that the body has no separate existence than the spirit. When the body is separated from the spirit, it cannot persist. But as long as the body and soul, they are combined, one can understand there is life. Right? So the symptom of life is action in the body, but the body itself is lifeless. And but one will understand the soul is active only when there is body around the soul because the soul is very deeply in the matter. And Prabhupada says, thus we can understand. But when they are separated, there is no manifested existence of the body or the soul. So for the soul to express its desires, experiences, the soul needs body. And for body to be animated, the body must have soul within. And this is how body and the soul, and on the greater sense, matter and spirit, they are so intensely combined, intimately combined, intricately combined. And therefore, the question is how that release is possible. The voidist, Prabhupada says this question is coming from a little bit of voidist angle. So Prabhupada writes here. The voidists say that the consciousness is product of combination of matter. And then you go in Darwin's and typically talk about how the consciousness evolves at the various levels of combinations of matter, amino acid, this and that. And they say that as soon as the matter is dissolved, then consciousness is also finished. Nothing remains. Everything is just big zero. That is shunyavad. Typically the Buddhist philosophy, right? Nothing is, death is the only reality. And when somebody dies, there is just nirvana. Nirvana means nothing remains, just all zero. Sir, if everything is all zero, then why to work hard just to attain zero? Right? If the student is working extremely hard and you ask him, what is your goal? He says, I want to get 0 marks. If everything is void, then why to work? Right? Why to work materially or why to work spiritually? Therefore, voidism is not a right conclusion. So this is the question of Devahūti. Text 18. We'll take one more. Yatha gandhasya bhumescha na bhavo vyatirekatah apam rasasya cha tatha yatha buddhe parasya cha. Translation.
Translation: as there is no separate existence of the earth and its aroma, of water and its taste, there cannot be any separate existence of intelligence and consciousness. Purport: the example is given here that anything material has an aroma. The flower, the earth, everything has an aroma. If the aroma is separated from the water, the matter cannot be identified. If there is no taste to water, the water has no meaning. If there is no heat in the fire has no meaning. Similarly, when there is want of intelligence, spirit has no meaning. Hare Krishna.
So now these are the examples of how deeply, and here Devahūti is asking question that, my dear son, there is no separate existence of earth and the aroma, prithvi and the gandha, yatha gandhasya bhumescha, na bhavo vyatirekatah, apam rasasya cha yatha. Just like apam means jal, water, and rasa, the taste. You cannot separate taste from water, you cannot separate heat from the fire, then the fire has no meaning, right? Chili, if you say that sweet chili, then I mean it's a vikara, it's some transformation. Chili means chili has to be hot, sugar means sugar has to be sweet. Similarly, Devahūti says, when there is a want of intelligence, the spirit has no meaning. And this is how very beautifully Devahūti is putting her questions around. So we will conclude here and continue tomorrow. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Gaura Bhakta
Thank you,
Vrinda ki jai.
Prabhupada.
Thank you, Prabhupada. Thank you, everyone. Today is a very auspicious day of Ekadashi.
Thank you, Prabhupada.
Happy
Thank
Ekadashi
you,
to
Prabhuji. Thank you, everyone. Hare
Hare
Krishna.
Krishna. Hare Krishna. Thank you, Prabhuji.
Thank you, Prabhupada. Thank you, Prabhuji. Thank you, everyone. Hare Krishna.